passenger plane flipping right on the runway, shattering into pieces and bursting into flames. This is probably the worst image of a plane crash to splash across our screens in a year where aviation disasters have taken center stage much more frequently than usual. But this horrific image is just the beginning of a ticking time bomb that's been itching to explode within the industry for decades now. This is the story of Flight 4819. Strap in, because this is going to be a wake-up call for the entire world. As is our usual fashion, we're going to begin with the pilots on board Flight 4819 and then the history of the plane in question. Stick with us here, because this case is about to get incredibly messy and you're going to notice alarm bells right out of the gate. Captain James Henneman, 50 years of age, is described as being a highly experienced pilot, especially in extreme weather conditions involving snow and wind. First Officer Kendall Swanson was just 26 years old and had joined Endeavour Air in 2024, just 1 year before the incident. At that moment, she was still holding a restricted ATP certificate, as was appropriate for her rank and level of training. Normally, this restriction to fly unassisted is cleared once a pilot reaches 1,500 hours of logged flight time. Swanson should have cleared this hurdle months before, yet she still held on to the restrictive qualifications more than a year after being hired at Endeavour. It seemed that the delay to getting her full qualifications was simply a matter of backlogged training that she was scheduled to take, and not due to any incompetence on her part. But that did mean that she was not cleared to operate during takeoff or landing during harsh weather. Neither pilot's flight hours or disciplinary records are available to the public just yet, a predictable move on the airline and investigative body's part since the crash just happened, and all of that information will be kept under wraps while the investigation continues. The airline has come out with a statement to assure the public that neither pilot had any serious complaints or incidents to report on, so we're going to have to take the official report's word for the time being. But take all of this with a grain of salt, because there are some concerns about Captain Henneman and Delta Airlines that weren't on Endeavour Air's official statement either. You see, Endeavour Air is a subsidiary company that falls under the greater Delta Airlines canopy. Just a year before, Captain Henneman attempted to transition to the main airline, Delta Airlines, but he struggled with Delta's much stricter expectations during testing. Instead of taking him off the fleet until he completed the necessary training to be fit for flying, he was instead advised to go back to their sister company, catch up on the necessary courses, and to try again at a later stage. Keep in mind, Henneman did pass Endeavour Air's testing, and he was technically certified by the FAA standards. His performance just wasn't up to Delta Air standards. This puts Endeavour's training standards into serious question, especially given the airline's regular routes and the rather volatile conditions on their usual flight paths. But Henneman was experienced for those conditions. Of that, there is no question. He'd been flying that route for 17 years, headed training for new pilots, and oversaw safety training for the airline. He was competent overall, and his FAA certification proves that. Until it becomes clear what aspect of the Delta pilot certification he struggled with, there's no telling how or where he was lacking in training. Endeavour Air mostly flies between the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean, though they do occasionally fly to farther destinations. Let's just put it this way. Any pilot flying for Endeavour Air needs to be experienced in extreme weather conditions. Both North America and Canada, where it mainly conducts its flights, are known for violent snowstorms, heavy winds, and hazardous snow and ice conditions. Even the Caribbean route that they specialize in is known for their intense tropical storms, so the fact that the training was not up to par compared to their inland parent company was highly concerning. As for the aircraft itself, all we know at this point in time is that it was a Bombardier CRJ-900, registered as N93-2XJ. It was 16 years old at the time of the incident, having been manufactured in 2008, with no clear indications that there was anything out of the ordinary with the plane during its 16 years of operation. On the day of the incident, 4819 was scheduled to take off from Indianapolis at 14:34 and set to land at Toronto Pearson International Airport in Canada just 2 hours later. Both cities had a very mild weather forecast for February the 17th, 2025, which was unusual for that time of the year when occasional rain showers and a fair amount of snow are to be expected. As for the passengers, most of their names are still redacted for the time being, but we know for certain that there were 76 passengers, 22 of whom were Canadian nationals, as well as 4 crew members, 2 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. So in total, that's 80 people altogether. For now, the cockpit recordings and black box's data is also sealed alongside all of the other unanswered questions that we still have, so we're going to have to assume that the takeoff went without a hitch in Indianapolis. There's no official details regarding the 2 hours in the air either, but here's where things start veering away from the norm. Upon reaching Toronto, the previous good weather forecast changed for the worse, which isn't out of the ordinary for the far northern Canadian climate. Winds had picked up to 35 knots. Sure, it was cold and windy with slight spatterings of snow, but these weren't exactly storm-level gales, so any experienced pilots wouldn't have had any issues to take the landing. It was, however, outside of First Officer Swanson's certifications to land. She was only cleared to fly at winds going 28 knots or less, yet Hennessy made the decision to give control of the plane over to her, presumably to get a bit of practice under her belt. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he wasn't aware of the co-pilot's limited clearance. Who knows why he made that fateful decision? But whatever the case, Swanson was put in charge as they approached Toronto Pearson International Airport, and she lined up to land on runway 23. Ahead of them, the runway had just been declared at a condition level 5. To put that into perspective, a level 1 condition means that the tarmac is iced over and snowfall obscures landing both from air and on ground. Now, level 1 is the worst kind of grade that a runway can be in to land. The higher the level goes, the better the conditions get, with level 6 being the optimal level to land in. So even with a slight turn in weather, conditions were still on the favorable end of the spectrum. Flight control did warn them of a slight bump in the side path of their glide route, most likely referring to the turbulence that was about to take effect as they got lower and the engines slowed their ferocity, making them more susceptible to wind, even if it wasn't that severe. Swanson brought the plane down, and then everything went to hell in less than 10 seconds. That slight bump that flight control warned them about hit them right before the wheels hit the tarmac, causing them to touch down harder than expected. That hard jolt sent a chain of effects in motion that was impossible to bring back under control the moment it took effect. The landing gears collapsed under the pressure, with the right-hand steering suffering the most severe damage. The yoke yanked out of Swanson's hands, and she lost control of the plane completely. The nose made a hard right turn towards the crashed landing gears, and the swing was so intense that the right wing dipped down, skimming the runway. That knock on the right wing was a devastating blow, so intense that it took the wing right off and flipped the entire body of the plane like a top. It flipped once, taking off the left wing and the tail in a shower of smoke, flame, and absolute chaos, before coming to a rest on its back. The passengers inside were lucky to be inside of a CRJ. Most other models would have completely disintegrated with such a devastating impact. But for now, all of the 80 people on board, who were strapped in for landing, were hanging upside down, but miraculously, they were still alive. And here's where the real heroes come in. Emergency services streamed onto the runway, where the flames had already melted a pool of snow around the plane.
Just so you are, there's people outside walking around the aircraft there. Yeah, we've got it. The aircraft there's upside down and burning.
But they needn't have worried about panicked passengers inside. In the 90 seconds it took the rescuers to reach the plane and get the hoses going to put the fire out, those 2 flight attendants had already got every single passenger unbuckled, they'd got them on their feet from their upside down position, and they'd begun to herd them toward the door. Calm, collected, and in an orderly fashion, those 2 women got control of the situation before the passengers even had time to give in to their panic. Instead of being met with half-crazed, terrifying passengers and the chaos that can ensue from a situation like this, the rescue workers were met with a well-organized evacuation of every single one of the passengers on board, injured and confused, but very much alive. And they were just in time, too. If it weren't for the flight attendant's quick response, the passengers wouldn't have gotten out in time before the first explosion went off. The jet fuel that the passengers had seen and smelled finally ignited, just as everyone was out of the plane and within a safe distance from it. All in all, 18 passengers sustained injuries, but none of those injuries are serious. All flight crew and passengers are accounted for, and the rubble has been cleared off the runway. As of the 18th of February, a day after the crash, all news reports have been halted and no new information has been released. Social media platforms connected to the pilots and flight attendants have been virtually scrubbed off the internet, and most of the passengers' personal social media has been set to private, with some disappearing off the internet completely. However, this immediate block of information should be taken as an ominous sign, given Delta Airlines' previous record when it comes to silencing victims. In 2016, Captain Carleen Petit, a pilot for Delta Airlines, filed a report citing safety concerns related to pilot fatigue, training deficiencies, and other safety issues within the airline's operations. Instead of investigating the claims, Delta Airlines retaliated by falsifying Petit's medical records to make it look like she was mentally ill. Petit tried for years to get Delta to drop the claims to reinstate her pilot's license. But the airline simply dragged the matter out in court until Petit was wrung financially dry and was forced to take a $500,000 payout to drop the matter. And this isn't just some crackpot scorned employee story. The case that Delta Airlines' own executives actively falsified her medical reports were proven in court to have happened, thanks to emails between the executives that were uncovered, where they not only discussed the bogus psychiatric evaluations, but also schemed about other ways to silence Petit. Since this lynching of an innocent and once well-respected pilot went down, employees at Delta have been too scared to come forward with concerns. It is thought that Petit's initial reports of overworked pilots and safety protocols being overlooked have never ceased to be an issue within the company. But like all cover-ups and shortcuts, the skeletons in Delta's closet eventually piled up so high that they finally spilled out into the open for everyone to see. And one thing's for sure, with a disaster of this magnitude, those skeletons are going to prance out onto the stage and put up a show like the world of aviation has never seen before. Delta Airlines might have a legal chokehold on everyone for now, but once this reaches court, there's going to be hell to pay. We never thought we'd say this on the channel, but for once, a crash has given us more to celebrate than we ever thought was possible. No one was seriously injured. The amazing flight attendants that are so often overlooked were finally validated for their amazing work, and most of all, it's got the potential to unearth one of the biggest problems in the aviation world: that the suits don't care about their employees' concerns, and they certainly don't care about their customer safety. A few million in hush money here and a few threats there, no, that won't work this time. We're not going to point the finger at Captain Henneman just yet. Yes, we agree that he shouldn't have entrusted a landing in those conditions to an unqualified pilot, but given Delta's treatment of their pilots, there's no telling what instructions or which stressors he was working under. For now, Delta has some sins to answer for, and there are 80 individuals out there who are undoubtedly recovering from trauma that no man, woman, or child should ever have to endure. Until this investigation has run its course, we're not blaming a single person on that flight just yet. For now, we'll just have to wait and see, and pray that another big corporation doesn't use money, coercion, and lies to bury the truth to save their own skin.